Alright guys, my name is Metagoblin and today we're going to be answering one very simple question: should you play Priest in the Burning Crusade? So in this video we're going to have 5 main sections. First of all, we're going to look at all the major additions and changes from vanilla progressing into the Burning Crusade. Secondly, we'll have a little look at the talent trees. Then we'll talk about PvE performance, PvP performance, and lastly we'll have a little look at the tier set looks and their set bonuses. Just before we jump in guys, apparently 90% of the people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel, so I would really appreciate it if you gave me a quick sub and like the video if you end up liking the video. But anyway, let's jump in. So let's look at all these major changes. We'll talk about the Shadow Spec first because this is probably what people are most interested in. Because obviously in vanilla, Shadow Spec wasn't considered a very viable spec and only had a very niche value, whereas in a Burning Crusade it was an extremely viable spec and a very highly desired spec for you to bring to your raids. So the main thing that made Shadow Priest suddenly viable in the Burning Crusade was the introduction of the spell Vampiric Touch. So this was an extra dot in the Shadow Priest toolkit, very similar to Unstable Affliction because it had to be casted and had a very unique effect of regenerating the party's mana. So you stick a Shadow Priest in the healer group and the healers are going to absolutely love you because you're going to grant them loads more mana, which means they can better protect the raid. Then you put one into the caster DPS group and the same thing, they're going to absolutely love you because they're going to actually be able to do more DPS. This is why Shadow Priests were nicknamed a mana battery in the Burning Crusader. When you combined this effect with Shaman Totems and Paladin Judgment of Wisdom, you're looking at a serious amount of mana regeneration for the entire raid. It also just generally meant that they did a lot more DPS because you have an extra dot to apply onto the boss. They didn't do top tier DPS by enemies, but obviously they made up for that by being such a strong support class. And to be honest, if a Shadow Priest did work hard, they can do some serious DPS and compete with the other DPS in the raid. This is what made Shadow Priest a extremely highly desired class, but strangely actually quite rare class. The whole time of me playing Endless WoW, for the 2 months I played it, I've only seen one Shadow Priest, which is interesting to be honest. Nonetheless, they're actually in really high demand. Obviously the vanilla Shadow Priest has serious mana issues because you would run out of mana so quickly. This was kind of fixed obviously by Vampiric Touch because all the shadow damage you deal would be returned as mana. And they also had Shadow Fiend as a big mana cooldown which would generate even more mana to them. Blood Elf Priests would have even more mana regeneration because of their Blood Elf racials, but on top of that they had a unique Priest racial called Consume Magic, which allowed them to dispel one of their own buffs to just get a little bit of extra mana back. And then Draenei had an ability called Symbol of Hope, which was basically a weaker version of a Mana Tide totem. They also had an ability called Shadow Word Death, which was an execute ability that did quite a lot of damage, although if a target didn't die, it also deal damage to yourself. So you have to be, a little bit careful with this ability. But luckily you have the ability called Vampiric Embrace, which regenerates healing based on shadow damage as well for the rest of the party, and it will kind of top your health up so you don't have to worry about Shadow Word Death so much. Let's talk more about the healing and utility abilities. First of all, we've got Prayer Mending, which is a reactive AoE healing effect. Basically you would apply it to a target, that target would take damage, and then it would heal when they took damage and jump to the next target, and then when the next target dealt damage, then it would jump again and it will keep jumping around for a maximum of 5 charges and basically acted like an AoE healing effect. You also had Circle of Healing, which is a very instant cheap AoE heal that would just heal the current target that you were targeted but also everyone else in a 15-yard radius. And you could just spam this while moving because it was just totally an instant cast. There's also the ability Master Spell, which has become one of the most iconic priest abilities. What it would do is remove 1 debuff or 1 buff from 10 enemy targets and 10 friendly targets in a radius, but it would also have a unique effect to remove invulnerability cooldowns like Divine Shield and Ice Block, which made priests absolutely lethal in PvP, even when they were healers. You only have to look at PvP legends like Hydra on his old videos during the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King to fully see that. Lastly, we have Pain Suppression, which is basically a shield wall buff that can be applied to other people on a very short cooldown compared to shield wall, and also increase the resistance to purge effects. Obviously it's not as powerful as shield wall, but I like to call it a little mini shield wall. So let's take a little look at the talent trees. First change in the discipline tree was Silent Resolve, which also had the added effect to reduce the chance of your spells to be dispelled by 4%. Absolution was also added, which just very simply reduced the mana cost of Dispel Magic, Cure Disease, Abolish Disease and Mass Dispel by 15%. The effects of meditation were actually doubled from 15% to 30%. Obviously this was a very key talent that Shadow Priest and Holy Priest would always spec into to increase their mana regeneration in raiding environments. The reason why it's not maxed out on this character, by the way, is because this is the default Shadow PvP spec, just for your information. The cast time saving effect on improved mana burn was doubled. Divine Spirit got a talent buff. Your Divine Spirit and Prayer of Spirit spells also increase the target's spell damage and healing by an amount equal to 5% of their total spirit. There's an added talent here called Focus Power. Your Smite, Mind Blast and Mind Dispel spells have additional 2% chance to hit. In addition, your Master Spell cast time is reduced by 0.5 seconds, so obviously it will increase to 1 second. We also have Focused Will, which after taking a critical hit gain a Focused Will effect, reducing all damage taken by 2% and increasing healing effects on you by 4%, stacks up to 3 times. Just one of those great talents that make normal Priest, Healing Priest pretty tanky in PvP. And obviously we also have Enlightenment here, increase your total stamina, intellect and spirit by 1%, and at the end of a tree we have Pain Suppression. So Discipline got a massive rework compared to Holy. That's probably because of the gameplay of Arena becoming into light and fleshing out during a Burning Crusade, and obviously there needs to be a decent PvP spec to make Priest viable. Whereas Holy, it's largely unchanged, just a few additions here and there. First of all, we have Surge of Light. Your spell criticals have a 25% chance to cause your next smite to be instant cast, cost no mana, but be incapable of a critical hit. So you probably come across videos of the Smite Priest. This is like more of a Smite Priest talent build. Largely not used that much, to be honest. Next we have Holy Concentration, which is a bit of a clear casting effect. Have a 2% chance to enter a clear casting state after casting any flash heal, or any heal basically, and then it will reduce the mana cost of your next cast by 100%, very similar to the Shaman clear casting effect. Next we have Blessed Resilience, which gives you critical strike immunity, well, a chance to do it, for 6 seconds after being critical hit. Then we have Empowered Healing, just a very simple flat healing boost, which is normally the talent just before the last talent in pretty much every single tree in the game. And then at the bottom of the tree we have Circle of Healing. So the first 2 changes in the Shadow tree is 1, Shadow Reach only needs 2 talent points to become max, so you have to spend less talent points on this. Shadow Weaving actually gets nerfed down from 3% to 2%. The Vampiric Embrace ability is actually buffed slightly by 5%. We have a simple mana reduction talent here called Focus Man, reduces the mana cost of your Mind Blast, Mind Control and Mind Flay by 15%. We also have Shadow Resilience, reduces the chance you'll be critically hit by all spells by 2%. Largely a very useless talent, to be honest. We also have Shadow Power, which gives you a flat increased chance to critically hit with your main damage abilities. We also have Misery. Again, it's the very typical second to last talent point. It always just gives you a flat increase to DPS or healing. Very simple. And then at the bottom of the tree we have Vampiric Touch. So let's talk about the PvE raiding and dungeon performance in the Burning Crusade. So the Priest, as always, considered to be basically the best healer in the game. They're great at tank healing because of the talent Inspiration, which means they increase the armor value of the tank by 25% whenever they crit one of their heals. Very useful for tank healing. They're great for AoE healing because they've got Circle Healing, Prayer of Mending, stuff like that. They have Horts, they have Power Word, Shield for emergency situations. They've got great buffs that they provide to the raid. Got a really good utility with Dispels, Master Spell, Stamina and Spirit buffs. Fear Ward for fights like Nightbane on the tank, which is really useful. They can skip Dungeon Trash with the ability Mind Soothe, which allows the party to move closely by a difficult pack that they don't want to deal with, which can save time. You can also remove your own threat with Fade ability. You've got an AoE Fear ability, which is really good if you accidentally pull too many mobs, and it's safe to do so. That can really save you in some tight situations. You also have Mind Control, which can be used in heroic dungeons to do some insane damage, because if you can mind control some of the really high damage dealing enemies and Shattered Halls, for instance, you can just do insane cleave damage with this like Whirlwind ability, and you do like 2k DPS. It's actually pretty insane. Obviously I've already talked about how useful Shadow Spec is. They provide really decent DPS and a massive amount of support for the rest of the raid with passive healing and passive mana regeneration. So let's talk about their PvP formats. I would consider the Priest to be the top tier PvP class, so S, A, B, C. I would consider it an S tier class. They are a very capable healer with insane utility available to the team, probably the best utility out of the other healers, to be honest. First of all, they have the ability Mana Burn to mess with the other healer's mana. They have Master Spell to stop mages and paladins from protecting themselves from your DPS. You can put out Pain Suppression, which is basically a mini shield wall onto a friendly target to totally save his life. You got Power Infusion to boost your mate's caster DPS's DPS. You got Fear in the form of Psychic Scream, which can be used on the enemy healer, or it can be used to peel, 2 melee DPS off you, which is probably one of the best peeling abilities in the game, to be honest, because it's an AoE Fear, and Fear is the best CC in the game. They can very easily provide support DPS, so Shadow Word Death and other abilities to secure a kill. They've also got Devouring Plague and Shadow Word Pain for extra dark damage. If you imagine when you're grouped with a Warlock, for instance, the Healer Priest can provide 2 very powerful dots, and then they can combine that with Warlock dots like Corruption, Unstable Affliction, Curse of Agony, and then you've got Warrior and Rogue Bleeds on top of that, and obviously the dot damage is even further magnified if you're playing in Shadow Spec. Priest actually mostly did go RMP comp, which is Rogue Mage Priest, which is considered one of the most lethal team comps in the Burning Crusade. You can regenerate your own mana well with Shadow Fiend. You've got Mind Control, which can be used to mind control other healers, force them to jump off a ledge, forcing them to massively lose their DPS. And if that other team doesn't have good coordination, then those DPS people are not getting healed for a very long time. When it came to Shadow Spec, one of the strongest parts of playing Shadow was the fact that you still had a lot of really cool healing and support abilities while playing DPS, so it's almost like having 2 healers in the game, because you can dispel crowd control effects on your healer and totally protect your healer, provide extra healing onto the healer, you can provide Power Word Shield, you can use that in Shadow form, so if your friend DPS is taking too much damage, you can provide a little bit of extra support when it comes to healing for the healer. And yeah, they're really, really strong. In my opinion, you're going to have a lot of fun playing Shadow Priest, or even, Discipline or Holy Priest, because you have a really big utility toolkit. So if you're the kind of guy who doesn't just like mindlessly DPSing all the time and just focusing on his own DPS, but also doing a little bit of that and helping out with your team members to help them survive and help them optimize their DPS and just generally keep them alive, then you're definitely going to enjoy Shadow Priest more than, for instance, playing a warrior or something like that, because it is at its heart a support class. So let's take a little look at the tier sets. First of all, we have tier 4, Incarnate Raiment. First of all, we have the healing version of the set. The 2 set bonus basically gives you a little bit of an extra cheeky hot whenever you do prayer or healing, so massively going to increase your AoE healing capability, because you're doing an extra little bit of healing for 9 seconds after a prayer healing, which obviously affects up to 5 people. And then there's an extra method to reduce the cast time of a Greater Heal every time you cast Flash Heal. Let me read it out. Each time you cast Flash Heal, your next Greater Heal cast within 15 seconds has its casting time reduced by 0.1, stacking up to 5 times. Let's take a look at the set bonuses for Shadow Spec. First one, your Shadow Fiend lasts a little bit longer, 3 seconds longer, and it also has a little bit of extra stamina, but most of the time it doesn't die anyway, to be honest, and obviously that just means you're going to get a little bit of extra mana back. And then the next bonus is your simple damage bonus on Mind Flay, and for some reason on Smite as well, which I don't really understand, but it's there. I guess it's there for Smite Priest, and it almost insinuates that a Smite Priest was actually intended to be in the game, so that's actually quite interesting. Next we have a tier 5 set. Unfortunately the tier 5 set is, like the previous set, is really tailored towards looking more like a healing Holy Priest set, but a PvP set does look more like, makes you look more like a Shadow Priest. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's look at the set bonuses. 2 bonus is if your Greater Heal brings the target to full health, you gain 100 mana, so a little bit of extra cheeky mana regeneration, and increase the duration of your renew by 3 seconds. That's actually quite useful. For Shadow Spec, we have each time you cast an offensive spell, there is a chance your next spell will cost 150 less mana, so a little bit of extra mana regeneration for you. Each time your Shadow Word Pain deals damage, it has a chance to grant your next spell cast within 15 seconds up to 100 damage and healing. That's actually quite interesting, because you can use that to snapshot dots, which is one of the best ways to optimize your damage as a dot class, so that is actually quite interesting. Lastly, we have tier 6, the Absolution set. This does look more like a Shadow Priest set, thankfully. Let's have a look at the healing set. Reduces the mana cost of your Prayer of Healing by 10%, fairly simple. Increases the healing of your Greater Heal ability by 5%, so honestly pretty boring. Blizzard probably kind of ran out of ideas at this point by the looks of it. Let's look at the, I don't actually need to right click all of them. Increases the duration of Shadow Wear Pain ability by 3 seconds. That's actually really good because that's a massive damage increase. Increase the damage of your Mind Blast by 10%, so not too bad, but again not that interesting compared to the other tier sets. But anyway guys, that's where I'm getting in the video there. My name is Medigoblin. To my next video. Ciao.